Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560. The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. I'm very interested in this character profile on one Bill Gates. There's a new book, Billionaire. It's entitled Billionaire, Nerd, Savior, King. Bill Gates and his quest to shape our world. Yeah. Yeah, the messianic complex part of it is the thing I'm most interested in as part of the character profile. Because, of course, we got a lot of pronouncements from Bill Gates during COVID. It was painful to listen to, and in retrospect, it didn't really turn out that Bill Gates had a much better handle on the virus and what to do about it than did most of our public health establishment inside the Beltway.
Mask wearing has essentially no downside. They're not expensive. Bars and restaurants in most of the country will be closed as we go into this wave, and I think, sadly, that's appropriate. Depending on how severe it is, the decision about schools is much more complicated because the benefits are pretty high. The amount of transmission is not the same as in restaurants and bars. So, trade-offs will have to be made.
When do you think life will fully return to what we thought of as normal back in January? No masks, no social distancing, no other protective measures necessary.
Certainly by the summer, we'll be way closer to normal than we are now.
Summer of 21.
But even through early 2022, unless we help other countries get rid of this disease and we get high vaccination rates in our country, the risk of reintroduction will be there. And of course, the global economy will be slowed down, which hurts America economically in a pretty dramatic way.
Yeah, pretty dramatic.
He's not an epidemiologist. I mean, just because he has money, people were putting him on TV. I was infuriated when he was talking about schools. And that he was talking about the summer of 2021. It's the summer of 2024, and people are still wearing masks outdoors alone and in their cars when they're driving alone.
Well, the Chicago Public School System just recently declared the pandemic finally over.
That's true.
5 minutes ago.
That was last week. That was last week, Dan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And Bill Gates also is a very charitable view of China's performance during COVID.
Well, I don't think that's a timely thing because it doesn't affect how we act today. China did a lot of things right, at the beginning, like any country where a virus first shows up, they can look back and say where they missed some things. Some countries did respond very quickly and get their testing in place, and they avoided the incredible economic pain. And it's sad that even the U.S., that you would have expected to do this well, did it particularly poorly. But it's not time to talk about that.
Actually, the only countries that avoided the economic pain, not to mention the horrific retardation of the intellectual and social development of kids in K through 12, were countries that had a light touch with respect to lockdowns.
Well, yeah, Sweden is a great example. And him to talk about China like that. If you had COVID, do you know that they would come and kill your pet that was in your house? Even if you didn't have to be hospitalized because of COVID, if they found out you had COVID, they would come and take your pets away. And they locked people in their high rises.
Well, they did some things right. They did some things wrong.
Yeah.
But it was all good faith. That's the tone of Gates's review of the Chinese Communist Party's performance. I can't say I'm a subscriber to that view. And, fresh off of COVID, he immediately redoubled his efforts in other areas like, wanting to bury 70 million acres of trees in the Pacific Northwest to fight global warming. He just wants to cut them down, bury them in the ground. Climatologists suggest that will really not have any impact. In addition to that, of course, we have to do something about cows.
The thing is that cows and other grass-eating species have a digestion system that emits methane. And methane is a very powerful greenhouse gas. And so cows alone account for about 6% of global emissions. And so we need to change cows, just cows alone.
How are we going to do that?
Yeah. Have an Impossible Burger. It's on Bill Gates. We haven't even got into the relationship with Epstein, whatever that was, the divorce from Melinda, whatever that was. But let's get into it. Anupreeta Das is a finance editor for the New York Times. She is the author of the book, Billionaire, Nerd, Savior, King, Bill Gates and His Quest to Shape Our World. Anupreeta, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Sure. I should say that the process of writing a book is so long that I did change jobs last month.
Oh, you did?
So I'm now the South Asia correspondent for the New York Times, but I was finance editor for the entire duration of the book. But in any case, I'm still the same person.
Okay, very good. Glad. You're still taking credit for the book you authored. That's good. So I mean, from my perspective, I mean, you obviously know that I'm conservative. I mean, Bill Gates over the last several years has demonstrated himself to be sort of a sci-fi villain and, on a personal level, a creepster. Tell me where I'm lacking nuance.
I was listening to your discussion just earlier on Gates during the pandemic, and I think what was really interesting to me is this sort of oracular status that he got in 2015 when he first, predicted that the next big event would be a pandemic. And I think when the pandemic did happen, his kind of expertise on vaccines going back decades, it's an area very dear to him. Plus the size of the Gates Foundation, which is the biggest private philanthropy in the world, and then combined with his celebrity status, I think kind of made him the authoritative voice and put him on par with someone like Dr. Anthony Fauci in terms of getting the message out. So to me, I think that piece of it is definitely a big part of his identity. But also, obviously, there is the personal element, looking at the divorce, looking at the connections with Epstein, which have also exposed another side of Gates.
Well, I mean,
can you tell us about that?
Well, but before we get to the personal, just on the COVID thing, and he's got an interest in vaccines, and the Gates Foundation does research, and that's all well and good. But it turns out that he said all kinds of things that turned out not to be true, and there's no humility about it. There's certainly no sort of post-mortem on it, where there's a recognition and accountability for saying things like he was saying about vaccinations in schools and transmission rates and sort of repeating a version of the sloganeering, you can't get or give if you get vaccinated. And of course, that turned out not to be the case. So, I mean, it's things like that I think particularly royal people, you can be well-intended and put your money in the direction of trying to improve public health generally in this country or the world over. That's all well and good. But when you hold yourself out to be this, oracle, and you turn out to be wrong in so many respects, and this goes for Fauci too, for that matter, since you brought him up, and there's no sort of resetting of the table. So going forward, maybe I'm going to operate with a little more humility about what we know and what we don't know as we try to combat novel viruses, for example.
Right. I mean, I think, to be fair, he was doing the best he can, along with everyone else in the world, just trying to figure out in real time what was going on with this rapidly mutating virus that suddenly had changed the way the world operated. So that's definitely one piece of it. But in addition to that, I think his bias toward technology and science, I mean, that's what his background is, right? Tech and science and innovation. I think those things really affected and kind of led his, his approach to how he thought the pandemic should be handled. And vaccines, again, were a big part of that. And I think the foundation has so many networks of influence that it can really, really tilt the balance in favor of certain alliances that it funds and that it works with, whether it's WHO, whether it's this vaccine alliance that they've been part of. So I think there is a lot of impact and effort and kind of energy that goes into sending a certain message that Gates and the foundation have, and that is reflected in Gates's personal approach to seeing the world in terms of, being very technology focused, obviously with Microsoft, and that worked out really well for him. So I think, technology is a huge innovator, believer in science. So I think people look at that, and then the holding to account piece of it, I think is more diffuse. I mean, do you hold one person to account? Do you hold an entire system to account? So I think he, along with many others, has escaped that holding to account piece of it.
Tell us about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and why his marriage went south.
With Epstein, it has always been a little bit unclear. Now, Gates has always said that he met Epstein to discuss philanthropy because people in his circle told him that Epstein was someone who could get a lot of money. And this, you have to remember, this is right after the Giving Pledge in 2010 when there were it was like essentially a get out the vote campaign by Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and Melinda French Gates to get billionaires to think and give and commit more to philanthropy. And so there was a lot of energy at that time, and Gates was looking to find a way to raise more money. And then Epstein got into that, and my reporting shows that he really was pushing to find a way into Gates's orbit. And there was this whole JP Morgan donors fund that he was trying to pitch. So from all accounts, that was the context in which Gates met with Epstein. Now, one of the things is when he met with Epstein, this is after Epstein's kind of, his behavior had been well established. And it is surprising that someone of Gates' stature with armies of personal staff would not have looked into that before, allowing him to sit down with Epstein, knowing that the optics of that at some point, if it came out, would be terrible. So that was kind of interesting. The divorce with Melinda French Gates, I think, had been, from everything I have reported, had been in the making for a while. I think their relationship hadn't been, as good as it might have been when they first got married. And I think Melinda French Gates really was very clear about the fact that she did not like Jeffrey Epstein, and she found him creepy, and that she was very clear with her ex-husband about, that he shouldn't stay in touch. And despite that, he did. And there was kind of, I think, about 3 years during which he met Epstein. And Gates, again, has always said it was for philanthropy, and he said it's a lapse in judgment. And he said that he was really sorry for giving Epstein the credibility by associating with him.
Is it true that Gates was not allowed to be alone with interns at Microsoft?
That is something that you're going to have to buy my book and read.
Okay.
Oh, good tease. I like it. Way to sell. Way to close.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. No.
All right. I'll take that as a yes. But okay. All right. Go. We'll buy the book and read it.
I'm not saying anything. Yeah.
Okay.
But stories do have a way of taking a life of their own. So.
Okay. What about the reporting that's out there in the public domain that the Epstein-Gates relationship was in part predicated on Epstein managing this? Epstein claimed this. The reporting goes. Epstein claimed that he was managing some of Gates's money.
That, as far as I know, is not true. I think he was trying to find a way to arrange basically a donor-advised fund, right? This massive vehicle in which a lot of billionaires could put their money, and this way, his idea was that this would give Gates and the Gates Foundation access to billions of dollars, and he and J.P. Morgan, which would have managed this fund, would be able to kind of share the fees, and J.P. Morgan would manage, get asset management fees, and he would get a cut. So those were discussions that Epstein had with J.P. Morgan executives. And I think he also met with foundation officials who he was trying to kind of pitch this idea to, and Gates met him as part of that. So again, that seems to have been Epstein's main way to try to get to Gates. But, he is also he was also a character who peddled, an influence. He would make connections.
Right,
he liked to kind of touch, go from one person to another.
Yeah,
and
touch. You definitely like to touch. Yeah,
that.
we know that. So is it, just the net, you like, billionaires. Every billionaire has an ego. Every radio talk show host has an ego. Every politician has an ego. I get it. But, there are gradations. And I'm trying to get your take doing this character profile on Gates. I mean, is this somebody who is like has a messianic complex, who is almost like a cultish in his belief in his own righteousness as he pursues re-engineering cows and burying trees and all of that business?
I think there was an interview that he did once a while ago where he said, his whole approach to philanthropy was driven by the enormous success he had at Microsoft, right? Seeing a market in personal computing and then building that into one of the biggest companies in the world. I think to him that was like, wow, what else can I do? So it is hubris, but it's based in his, I think in his own mind. It would be, again, I don't know what's going on in Gates' mind exactly, but just looking at the way he has talked about it, I think there is a bit of hubris, not just in Gates, but also in a lot of other very successful people who feel that they've done one thing extremely well, and that gives them, sort of the hubris, the confidence to try something else and feel that they're going to be as successful.
We know a lot of guys on the trading floors in Chicago who made millions of dollars and then started spending like they were a rap star and lost millions of dollars too. So yeah, it's interesting. Maybe that's something somebody might want to tell Bill Gates. Anupreeta Das is now the South Asia editor for the New York Times. Her book, Billionaire Nerd Savior King, Bill Gates and His Quest to Shape Our World, that is available next week on the 13th, but of course you can get it now, pre-order it now at all the usual places. Anupreeta Das, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
3 reasons I ditched my old school deodorant and made the switch to Lumi Whole Body Deodorant for pits, privates, and beyond. First, Lumi is crazy effective. It controls odor in a new way and keeps me fresher longer. Second, it's a whole